The 2026 MotoGP season opener is in the books, and it was a doozy. It's maybe the wildest season opener I can remember in a long, long time, since maybe 2020, the Marc Marquez injury. It's much crazier, I think, than I expected in terms of the various, minor controversies and major result swings than you would have thought coming out of the test, even though the big headline item was sort of foreshadowed by the test. But it was fun. I know you're quite exhausted already at this point by this whole weekend, but that's
this whole month.
But that's partly a reflection that it was a good weekend, wasn't it? It was really there's a lot happening in a good way.
No, it was. It's weird because it ended the way that we expected it to end, with Marco Bezzecchi stood in the top step of the podium. So the race ended the way it should have, I guess. But man, it didn't start that way. We had chaos basically from, I guess even from Friday afternoon with the rain during the kind of whenever everyone was trying to figure out who was going to Q2, that then kind of bogged down Pecco Bagnaia and screwed up his weekend. Then we had Marco Bezzecchi breaking the lap record in qualifying, but still managing to crash, and Marquez pulling a lap out of nowhere. Then Bezzecchi falling out of the race. Acosta's first win, and then Sunday was just what? Moto3 was fairly straightforward, but Moto2 and MotoGP were just what just happened?
Yeah. Just there's every new session there was something. It felt like maybe Friday was relatively chill, but starting from Saturday already from qualifying, something in the air, and obviously the pack tends to be bunched up.
Heat.
But it was the heat. The pack tends to be bunched up when you have a test coming in.
Yeah.
But that didn't really seem to be the case because of how different the conditions appeared to be relative to the test, even though it's hard to pick up on why exactly. But
it was hotter.
Yes.
I think a combination of Pirelli rubber, and it was it really was. Today was as hot as I remember a day here. And I've been coming here for since 17 or 18. I was here for the very first MotoGP test, which I think was 18, and that was really hot because it was really early in the year. And obviously this is the earliest start to a MotoGP season since the Grand Prix calendar started at Daytona in 1960 something. I read.
I believe you. Yeah, I'll have to take your word for it.
It's by far the earliest start in the modern era. This is the first of March, my birthday, so it's my birthday today, and we're I remember when we would be preseason testing on my birthday. I remember being out for dinner on my birthday with a bunch of Moto2 and Moto3 riders in Qatar when I started getting messages saying we're not racing. There's this virus thing going around in 2020. So that's how much earlier we are, and I think that this time of the year here, and then it's been cloudy all weekend, and the sun came out today, and it was beautiful blue skies. And the place just baked.
Yeah, because comparing to the numbers that we have, the last year wasn't exactly cold either, but it appears that it certainly felt different. The combination of the heat and the track state.
Well, the problem always is that your temperature reading is taken in the shade. It's your ambient air temperature in the shade, and it doesn't take into account how much sunshine there is basically. And I think that was the big factor today.
We'll get to the specifics of that in a second, because surely part of that is part of why we got the results that we got this weekend from the track. But let's get to the big ticket item first. Marc Marquez, obviously still the MotoGP protagonist, coming into the season not fully fit. Should have had a points tally coming out of the weekend that was either championship leading or close to championship leading. He should have been in very good shape. And then with a handful of laps to go, hops the curb at turn 4, and the rear wheel rim and the rear tire go goodbye, and that's a 0 points. From the Race Members Club, Paul Eagles asks, I'm sure I'm not the only one who wants to know, WTF happened to Mark's rim? Did it happen when he ran wide, or did he run wide because the rim was knackered? And Simon Spies, Amanda Kirshner, Timo Ehlers, all with similar questions, as you do. As far as we understand, as far as both Marquez and team principal Davide Tardozzi said, there's no reason to believe it happened at any moment before the curb strike at turn 4, because he specifically took the decision to run wide in that moment and take to the runoff in order to not crash, in order to minimize the risk of crashing. in that moment. I mean, you're going to exploit the runoff that way multiple times in a race if you're attacking, especially as he was in that moment chasing after Raul Fernandez and Pedro Acosta. And he says he hopped that curb a million times in testing, and he hopped it in practice, and every time it was fine. It was fine for all the Moto3, Moto2 riders, and he hopped it at that point in the race, and that was one hop too much. The rear was gone immediately. Have you heard any theories whatsoever, like why?
I mean, sometimes it just happens. I've seen it happen a million times. It just depends on what way you land. It depends on like the other forces that are on the bike at the time and what way they're stressing the bike. That sometimes the bike is just a little bit more rigid or whatever. If he's done it 100 times in testing, it could be that rim had a hairline crack in it somewhere that they've not picked up on, and that it's a consequence of just repeated. It's metal failure from repeated hits. There's all sorts of things that we'll probably never know, that Ducati might know, but probably won't ever tell us, that could have caused it. But yeah, it's just one of those things. It's why does a chain break? Why does something crack? Why does something break? It just happens sometimes. I don't say not just happens, because that implies that there's no cause for it, but it's a thing that can happen, and it's a thing that they'll go away and analyze and figure out why. It's not the first time, and it's not even the first time here, because if we go back 24 hours, Jorge Martin had a tire pressure investigation in the sprint race that he was then wasn't penalized for, because it was a leaking rear rim, which implies he's done something similar, and it's bent it less than Marc did, and that caused similar. I think Enea Bastianini last year in Austria.
Last year, no, it was way before that. It was not last year. It was when he was an outside title contender at Gresini, unless it was also last year, and I don't remember it happening last year.
That's most likely at Austria. There was a Pedro Acosta one in Indonesia, where he bent the rim and was leaking
the tire pressure let off.
Thing. So it happens. And like, let's be completely honest, Marc is an aggressive rider. It's the sort of thing that happens when you're an aggressive rider is riding aggressively, and sometimes the curb just doesn't play ball with it. It just happens, and yeah, it is just one of those. This is a thing that can be moments, I think, that you have to take into consideration in a 44 race championship.
Yeah, when you take a Maximo Quiles approach to track limits, optional track limits in parts of the track,
Maximo Quiles was much better today.
He was, yes. Was very, very, very inside the track limits. It was very, and yeah, had a very good race in Moto3, which I'm sure will soothe Marc's angst at least a little bit. We should say, I mean, no blame to him. That you're supposed to be able to hop the curb. That's part of the game. That's fine. That's not really a risk you expect any of your riders to bake in. And in fact, if they don't exploit that possibility in the moment of taking to the runoff, you'd argue they're under-exploiting what is in their bike. But that's just a roulette risk you carry. He had a really good weekend, like really, really, really good, in the sense that he looked very limited, but despite that limitation, what he was going to get out of it was pretty remarkable compared to what the other Ducatis were going to get out of it. And starting with like the moment of the weekend from Marc's end for me was the Q2 lap, which was phenomenal. It was a phenomenal effort, and it came a few minutes after the moment that made me realize, Ducati and everybody else is in serious trouble here. So we knew Bezzecchi was quick, right? Knew it coming out of the test was extremely obvious. We knew the Aprilia was in good shape here. We knew it was getting along with the track. When Raul Fernandez set that time in Q1 on the first run, and the time was so good, I was mad at him for going out for a second run. I was just like, just save it, like wait around for run 2. But I looked at that time, and I looked at what Franco Morbidelli and Pecco Bagnaia were doing at the same time on track, what Luca Marini was doing, and I was like, this bike is much better than every other bike on track this weekend. This could be a real beatdown. And in the end, it was, but Marc was one of the guys who was sort of trying to steer it away from that, and Marc showed that he could get that Aprilia level lap time when none of the other Ducatis could.
It's funny because with absolutely seemingly no self-awareness at all about this, someone asked him after the race if the KTM and the Aprilia had jumped the Ducati at least this weekend. And he said, no, Aprilia have, because they had 4 bikes there, but the KTM thing, it's Acosta. It's not KTM. And you can say the exact same about Ducati this weekend. It's Marc, not Ducati, that was kind of overperforming this weekend. He says that if he hadn't had the problem in the race, he would have finished second.
Yeah, second or third.
Second or third.
Second or third. Yeah, I think Acosta had a real shot at
I don't know if that's true. Because after the sprint on Saturday, he looked as empty as I've ever seen Marc Marquez look. Like, he looked as empty as he looked during some of those injury races, whenever you could tell he was in a huge amount of pain, and et cetera, et cetera. He was empty. Like, he was burnt out. And I think what we saw at the start of the race on Sunday didn't necessarily convince me that he had a lot of physical energy to keep that fight going for another 10, 15 laps. I think there would have been a point where the kind of Marquez championship contender reared its head internally over the Marc Marquez, I want to beat everyone all the time. And he would have settled for something a bit, he put him contention, don't get me wrong, but I don't think second was there.
I'm skeptical about him getting Acosta. I think Fernandez would have been there with the rear tire trouble that Fernandez was in. I think that one
half the grid
was a layup. Yeah, half the grid were, but to different extents. And Marc almost certainly, because he took it so easy in the early part of the race, basically trying to preserve his physical condition, trying to preserve the tire. I think as usual, he would have had an extreme amount extra. Let's talk wider Ducati, because that is kind of the big takeaway of this weekend. A streak of nearly 90 Grand Prix on the podium for at least one Ducati bike interrupted this weekend. And I think, again, it wouldn't have been, I think, if Marc stayed on. But the whole point of this streak is they haven't had to rely on a Marc Marquez level rider to keep delivering it. And this weekend, with Marc out, I looked up the last race that they weren't on the podium, the last Grand Prix that they weren't on the podium, Silverstone 2021. Jack Miller was 1/10 off for Ducati. Here, it was Fabio Di Giannantonio 8 seconds off, I think, or 7, and like 16 seconds off the win. It was rough. And there's a few questions from our members spotlighting that. Gavin the Seagull types somehow using, what are they called? Bird talons? What do they have?
Beak. Obviously.
Beak. Oh, yeah, that's better. I should have said that. Types using his beak. What a difference to last year. Is Ducati in trouble? Marc was clearly bad luck, but beyond that, they were nowhere. Max Avga asks, can we mark this GP as the beginning of the end of Ducati dominance and rejoice in the streets? And Ramble On with Rosie asks, is this the end of Ducati dominance or is this a fluke?
The end of Ducati dominance was 18 months ago.
Yeah.
Been saying this for a while. The end of Ducati, no, because a lot of last year was propped up by Marc Marquez.
Okay.
So actually, whenever you take Marc Marquez, as we saw at the end of last season, whenever he wasn't there, and suddenly Aprilia were winning things, and the Aprilia wasn't that good all season, don't get me wrong.
Which is why I can accept 9 months. 18, I don't think I can accept 18 months.
Well, I mean,
they were 1, 2, 3 in the same race last year. I mean, with the riders that aren't 1, 2, 3 on the grid. I know.
Okay. But my theory, we've said it over and over again about peak Ducati was basically the end of like 24.
Yes.
And there's been a slow gradual decline since then. So in that sense, I think that we're still on that curve. We're still on that curve. Part of it, I'm immediately going to disprove everything I've just said myself by then adding that, yes, that this weekend is a fluke, in that this circuit highlighted the strengths and weaknesses of certain bikes. I don't believe the Yamaha that we'll come to is as bad as it looked this weekend, but the circuit made it look worse than it is. I think there was a little bit of that with Ducati, but, and this is the key thing, this is the bit that really, in the past, we've seen Ducatis go to places where they've not been very good, and then do loads of riding on Friday and Saturday, and then come into Sunday with loads of data and find a step. And it was Honda that did that this weekend, not Ducati. If anything, Ducati maybe even regressed from the sprint to the main race.
Yeah,
and I think
that's definitely true.
That kind of highlights that the dominance isn't there anymore the way it used to be.
So I think we can assume, I don't know that this is a weak track for Ducati necessarily, because again, last year, Pecco Bagnaia certainly didn't seem to feel it's a weak track for Ducati.
I don't think it's a weak track for Ducati. I think it's weak conditions and circumstances.
Yeah, but that also didn't used to be the case. Again, as Pecco Bagnaia pointed out, we've had presumably a considerable regression of grip between the test and the Grand Prix weekend. Not entirely clear as to what exact factor beyond just the heat, because I don't know if you can. But that was also, we would have also had that last year.
Yeah, I know. It's so just another factor.
No, of course. Yeah.
I'm not saying it's that. Yeah,
and that probably explains, for instance, we know that the KTM doesn't like too much grip, although now the KTM appears to be a totally different bike to what it used to. KTM is now being mullered on the straights, but is dancing.
Unless you're Bastianini, the same problems as last year.
Yeah. But I mean, like, again, you watch this weekend and the KTM was consistently great in the twisty bits in Pedro Acosta's hands. You're like, this is not, I don't know this. This doesn't feel right. So that's a very interesting part of how the season is going to unfold going forward. But clearly, Ducati did what it isn't really supposed to do. And we know that sort of the harder rear carcass that is here, the heat resistance, and clearly was required because the tires were in terrible shape for most riders at the end of the race. But we know that they do weird things to the pecking order, not necessarily weird, super predictable things. We know how bad Ducati was at Mandalika last year with that particular rear tire carcass. They ate
just
the
jump in there
here.
a second. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but in this slight defense of Michelin, I think part of the reason for that is that it has been cooler all weekend until today, and everyone went with a softer option, kind of because that's what they'd been running all weekend. And I think that's part of the reason. I think pretty much everyone used the wrong tire today.
But it is just interesting that that's the kind of race where you would have expected, like, Acosta to go back to 11th or whatever, etc., and the Ducatis to go forward at the end of the race. And some Ducatis did go forward, most notably Franco Morbidelli went very forward at the end of the race. But guys who I would have expected to benefit from that kind of race, Marc would have been good, but it's Marc. Marc would have been good. Alex Marquez, even before he crashed, was really struggling for pace longevity. Pecco Bagnaia went backwards. Fabio Di Giannantonio, who seemed to have good pace all weekend, who is supposed to be kind of geared and tailored for this longer distance race, went backwards. He was getting gobbled up by the Honda of Joan Mir before that rear tire exploded, by Ayagura, who went through the field like a knife through butter. The usual strength just was completely gone for the Ducati camp that they used to rely on, that used to like fix their bad weekends. Just wasn't there.
I've just went back through. I need to correct everything I've just said because I went back and looked at my notes. Because Michelin have changed. They've got rid of one of the tire options for this year, but they've not changed the name to reflect it. And I had to go back and check something. So I presumed that everyone had gone with the softer option rear for the race. But I forgot that because we've scrapped one of the allocations, Michelin hasn't changed the name. So instead of having a soft and a hard, we now have a soft and a medium and no hard. So I don't know what it's the medium of. Everyone went with the harder option rear for the race. But I got this wrong because my terminology was correct. So I'm now correcting myself. Went back and looked. Michelin said yesterday that they expected everyone would use soft because that's what everyone had used all weekend and that's what everyone used for the sprint. So I'm wrong, but I see the problem is no one's done any time running in this tire. So it's actually the opposite of it. It's not that the tire was too soft, it's that no one had any experience of it. And I think that will also have played an element in the tire degrading so much.
For sure. And they just don't like it very much. We've also, they tried to get the allocation done with as quickly as possible starting Friday, basically in the session that is irrelevant. EM points out that this race was only 1 second faster than last year when Marc took the piss and rode behind Alex for the whole race. Yet look at where all the Ducatis were. What have Ducati done by making the GP26 worse than the GP25? Now, again, there's clearly a lot of stuff. Like something is happening in terms of the dynamics of the whole situation. The track temperature was 5 degrees more as measured. So specifically the temperature of the surface, not the temperature of the air. That will have an effect. Whether it can have this effect, I'm dubious, but it will have an effect. The tires are never quite the same tires always in all conditions, are they?
There's an argument that the 5 degrees is probably not completely reflective of actual conditions as well, because it's kind of a moment in time. at the hottest part of the day, whereas this place was baking red hot this morning at 8 a.m. So you know what I mean? There was a lot of heat in the ground today. And I'm trying to remember last year if that was necessarily the same. And I don't think it was. I think wasn't Moto 3 last year quite grey?
That was 100 races ago, wasn't it? So that's not happening.
Yeah. All I'm saying is, there's so much more to it than just the number of temperature.
Absolutely,
there's a lot of factors.
Yeah, it's a sensitive tire. It's also,
they're always sensitive. That's one of Michelin's
the
big problems.
better you make the bike, sometimes you feel like you've improved it, and you've definitely improved it, and you find that somehow, especially with the tire technology, basically kind of, I presume, frozen at this point because we're going to have a different tire supplier next year. You make the bike better and better and better, and suddenly you find out that the tires that used to respond, they just don't respond anymore. Even if you've made the bike theoretically better, more capable, suddenly, the main thing that attaches it to the ground no longer likes it as much. That's been kind of the secret of MotoGP development this whole time. Speaking of development, and I think this is a bigger conversation and a longer conversation over more rounds. And Simon looks disappointed that I have another segue here, but I'm sorry.
No, this has nothing to do with your segues. It's been a long month.
It has been a long. Hey,
I left home in January.
Right? Yeah, fair enough.
And I don't know when I'm getting home.
Yeah. Definitive Gaze says, we know Ducati's development is very data-driven. I would hope every manufacturer's development is very data-driven at this point.
I think there's still a fair bit of it done by feel.
Oh, boy. But yeah, has Marc Marquez, being incredibly exceptional, polluted the data so much that Ducati was not able to properly develop the bike? And this is, so in American sports, they call this kind of the Ewing theory, named after the former New York Knicks player, Patrick Ewing, which is basically sometimes teams are better once you take out their best player for some reason. Just something happens where even if there's a clear best performer, removing him from the picture suddenly gets the other parts to coalesce and to work better together with certain stars. And that's with Marc, it's a little different because obviously nobody is better without Marc, because Marc brings you titles, and that's, it's an individual sport. You need Marc to win you the titles, but that it's a persistent thing that people always bring up, that, Honda lost its way eventually while being led by Marc, and you could now see signs of Ducati losing its way by being led by Marc.
There is an argument that Honda didn't lose their way until they lost Marc.
I mean, it was all even the 2019 bike wasn't.
It was already not looking great. But there was a long period of time when the Honda was being developed by Taka Nakagami, and there was probably questions about where that. Yeah, I don't think so. I think that the Gigi Dall'Igna is far too methodical to develop a bike for one person, and they have far too big a pool of data from 6 or sometimes 8 riders to go in the direction of one person. At the end of the day, we've said it over and over, haven't we? Gigi wants to see his bike win. He doesn't really care what color that bike or who's on it, and I think that kind of will keep the whole project grounded in a Plus, we're also having a conversation at the minute about Marc wanting a 1-year deal in case he decides to go back to Honda in 12 months. You don't develop a bike for someone, and specifically only someone, whenever there's always the risk that they could A, quit and go to your rivals, B, retire, or C, get injured so badly they just stop riding mid-season. All of those things are more possible with Marc than they are with 95% of the grid, and certainly with any other factory team's number one rider. And I just don't think Gigi is the sort who would develop a bike for one person in those circumstances.
For me, it's I definitely think there would not be any sort of deliberate decision going on, and I don't think there would be any clear weakness from Marquez that is being exploited in this way. I mean, that theory has always everywhere across the board struck me as just a little bit too simple to explain a performance drop off from a machine with so many moving parts and so many people contributing to it. What I would say is there can be some truth to the idea that, when you're behind, you're going to take swings that can lead you to being ahead quicker or improving quicker or showing quick improvement. With Marc, you're not behind. you're not behind with Marc. That's the whole kind of point of hiring Marc, is he is going to drag your hunk of whatever very, very high up the order. And when the whole machine is working quite well, you are going to become a little risk averse, which Ducati definitely has been in its development. We've seen it multiple times. We've seen all the aero packages scrapped. We've seen even before Marc arrived, like engine specs being put on in the trash shredder in the trash compactor. Also because they have had seasons where certain riders' seasons were completely compromised by engine homologation. So they're also bitten by that. But it's just, when you're playing not to lose in that way, and you have a rider who you believe will be enough for you to succeed by playing not to lose, it is probably going to restrict you in a way that maybe Aprilia isn't restricted, or Honda with its recent concession status is not restricted. That kind of way. Like, they kind of have more to lose in a sense, and less of an impetus to be developmentally brave, which is maybe what you will have needed to do in this past couple of years.
Yeah, I mean that's fair, and I think we have seen others. I think we've seen Aprilia do that. I think Aprilia is probably the best example of a factory willing to be out there and to do, wild things with aero in particular, and now they're reaping the rewards of it.
We currently have a 90% off your first month offer running at the members club, and there's going to be a lot of fun stuff there on the MotoGP side this season, including me doing the rider rankings again and responding to questions about the rider rankings again. I have to tell you, it's been a lot of fun assembling this weekend so far, and I've already made a decision that is going to make people mad, which is not the target, not the aim, but
of course it comes
with the territory. It's not. It's really not. I do not relish conflict. Not a conflict guy, but I do relish numbers. A numbers guy. Speaking of numbers, the Aprilia numbers for this weekend, or for this Sunday specifically, are 1, 3, 4, 5, which is incredible. It is a genuinely phenomenal, amazing return. Paul McClanahan asks, stunning weekend for Aprilia as a whole. I know it's only the first race, but should Ducati be worried about Aprilia this year? And let's use this to speak about Aprilia specifically. But I think the answer to that is honestly, yeah, no, you can't not be worried about this kind of performance. 1, 3, 4, 5, with one of your riders just basically isn't fit. One of your riders is Raul Fernandez, who wasn't definitively fit and doesn't always do the race distance in the best way. One of your riders is Ayagura, who slept his way through 80% of the weekend for some reason and still was able to recover from 11th
who slept until lap 3 of the race.
Yeah, it was very good. It was exceptional, and Marco Bezzecchi looked like this must be a 37. I'm not going to be too hard on him for not delivering the 37, for crashing out in the sprint. It happens. When there's 44 races in a season, you're going to chuck it once or twice from the lead if you're this strong. But the level of the bike, it's fantastic.
So I spoke to someone from Aprilia this morning, and we were talking about Bez's crash, and they were like, you know what, it's not a bad thing. Which may be a bit surprising attitude to take, but the theory was that Aprilia and Marco Bezzecchi are not used to going into fights with Marc Marquez as the favourites, and that may be the new reality this year, and that maybe that crash and the sting of that crash is what reminds Marco Bezzecchi for the rest of this season that sometimes taking 9 points instead of 12 in a sprint is the right thing to do, and that there's more on the line than just a gold medal on a Saturday afternoon. And I get that point, because that bike might be a title contender. It really might be. And bizarrely, not bizarrely, because that's unfair on a world champion, but not just with Marco Bezzecchi, but also with Jorge Martin, who I think has surprised himself by being much more fit than he thought he was, much more ready to race than he thought he was. To the extent that I think he's going to Brazil now thinking, you know what, Jorge Martin's back.
Yeah, it's good that it's not good that it's such a long season, but it's good for his side that it's such a long season. Honestly, I was kind of underwhelmed today, but I think I still underestimate the fitness position that he's in. I'm not really, I guess I don't have a great read on it, because I honestly expected him to be closer from the get-go, and that's not really happened.
I think he's fully healed. He's just spent 3 months not doing any training on his upper body, or one side of his upper body, and it's just paying off. I think he's just weak.
Yeah.
relative
see
to
it.
what he would like to be. He's obviously fit in a cardio sense. Like the guy does a huge amount of cycling. Every time I've run the track this weekend, he's been out there doing it. He's been out there cycling just lap after lap after lap. He has a really high, which I think is related to India. I think he likes cycling the tracks as ongoing heat acclimatization, because you remember that India race where he threw up in pit lane afterwards, collapsed in pit lane afterwards because he said he wasn't heat acclimatized. So I think that's all part of an ongoing process there as well, where it's another thing he's working on. But yeah, he says he's better, much better than he thought he was, but he's not there yet. And yeah, I get it. Of course he's not.
That's that is what it looks like generally, and of course the glimpses of that Martin level performance that you want are already there. And there's, it's a positive weekend. It's kind of a positive weekend for all of them, even though I feel that at many points of the weekend, some of the riders were being bailed out by how good the Aprilia was, including Marco Bezzecchi taking pole. He crashed out on his second run in Q2, but it was just, that lap time was too good. That lap time wasn't even as good as his Friday lap time, but it was good enough because obviously he was in a great groove in the preseason and in the weekend, but also the bike, super, super, super strong. Championship leader is not an Aprilia rider, which, does not reflect what we saw over these 3 days, but it does reflect something. Laura asks, as the resident always agreeing with Simon person, it's not a good title to have. Don't call yourself that. As resident always agreeing with Simon person, I gotta say he called 2024 being the peak of Ducati correctly, but how has KTM, with Acosta specifically suddenly, has become so good, especially after an average preseason? I would say the decrease in grip is probably a big part of it, right? But also, I don't know how, because I don't think the preseason foreshadowed this at all from what we saw from Acosta on the long runs, from what we saw Acosta over a single lap, from even what we saw from Acosta in Q2. I did not see it in any of the lap times. And when you don't see it and then it happens, for me, like, my ape brain immediately goes to, the guy's just awesome. The guy's just so good. And honestly, this weekend, we've Acosta, there are still some doubts about Acosta. There's still some buyer's remorse over the status that he came in as like the next Marc Marquez, the next rider to dominate MotoGP, the next king. And despite how good his first 2 seasons were, I understand that part of that pushback will have been, there hasn't been any single weekend in MotoGP over these 2 years that you go, Acosta was the best rider in the world this weekend. That hasn't really happened. You could make the case a few times, but you could never be too sure. I think it's a no contest this weekend. I think he was head and shoulders above everybody else. I think this was outrageous. I think if you're Ducati and you've made that deal for 2027 already, you're sitting laughing. You're probably trying to block his phone number because he's going to call for a bonus for extra money on his contract now, but you've already agreed it, so you're not giving it to him. He was outrageous. It was amazing. It was incredible.
He was pretty good.
Okay.
He was pretty good. Now, I mean, to be fair, Marc Marquez also said that like I said earlier, Marc said the KTM difference was Pedro. And if there's anyone who can recognize a supreme talent on an average bike, it's Marc Marquez. That's kind of his skill set. And I buy that completely. I guess the only thing that I would argue is that he was the second best of the weekend.
And the best being? the
Bezzecchi Aprilia combination. Because but you have to take the bike into account to an extent. And I think that the Bez combination was superb this weekend. And I think probably, all things considered, with his physical limitations, I mean, if I was doing the rankings this week and not you,
yep,
I'd probably have Pedro 4th.
Wow.
Because Marc did an excellent job.
I can see Marc. I can see the others.
So did Jorge Martin.
Wow. Okay. I'm not there.
No, I know you're not. I can see that. And I don't mean that. That's no slight on Pedro. Don't take it as one. It's. I think we've got used to talking about Pedro's talent.
Mm-hmm.
to an extent where there was an element of, yes, of course he's finally won a race. Like it had to happen. I'm really glad it did. But I think, I mean, we're going to come to this, aren't we? There is an argument that it was slightly circumstantial.
I guess.
Yeah, I, as someone that agrees with the penalty that was handed out in the sprint, I would still have liked to have seen a straight last lap.
No, let me put it that way. There's an argument that it's not only an argument, it was 100% circumstantial because the guy who should have won the race chucked the bike.
Yeah.
On lap.
Well,
whatever.
yeah, there is this too.
Yeah.
There is this too. Yeah. It wasn't the weekend that I've looked at Pedro Acosta's performances the most and thought, wow, this kid's the next big thing.
Mm.
I've seen that in other weekends, and this wasn't as convincing as some of those weekends where he didn't win things. I think maybe whenever the KTM didn't look as put together. And I know that the other KTMs, the other KTMs struggled. The Tech 3 KTM struggled. Maverick Vinales is out trying to get a refund on his Jorge Lorenzo management agency fee, and Enea Bastianini just had all the problems of last year appear on Sunday for some reason. Binder wasn't awful all weekend considering preseason form. So I think that they found something that made that. It wasn't quite, especially in the weekend for Ducati were struggling. I don't think it was quite the. Yeah, I've seen Pedro in the past look more awesome, and I'm using those words deliberately to so that people are very aware that I'm not bashing him by saying he did a crap job at the weekend or anything, because he didn't. I've just seen him be even more convincingly the next big deal at other times.
Here was my calculation in my head. Bezzecchi beat the next Aprilia by 9 seconds, and Fernandez kind of rolled off at the end, but fine, that's okay. Marquez would have beat the next Ducati by, I don't know, maybe also 9, maybe somewhere there, like 9, 10. And he's hurt. He's not quite right. Again, this is the mark for number one argument. Fantastic. I can't really argue against it. There's nothing, he was Marc. It was Marc doing Marc stuff. Pedro beat Binder by 12 seconds on Sunday, which is new a little bit, I think. And it's just this whole, from the start of the season, from basically the preseason, we already know that he's the best KTM guy. I think it's new that he's the best KTM guy and the others cannot touch him, cannot lay a glove on him. They don't exist in the same universe of the race as he does. For me, that is new. And there was a suggestion in the members club that maybe he's freed up a little bit by knowing that he's not going to have to, attach his faith to KTM, even though maybe this wasn't the best Ducati weekend ever, but still Ducati is the much more championship proven proposition. And, he's got the deal presumably for 27, and he, it's coming. It's going to happen. He's going to get his shot at the title. And has that freed him up a little bit? And I don't think it's that. I just think it's the usual curve of, year 1, year 2, year 3, getting better. And this is the guy for whom apparently the sky's the limit. And what is he now? 43-0 against teammates in qualifying, and they can't touch him. Even when he wasn't even amazing in Q2. He was all right.
No, he was.
He did fine.
He was all right.
But they can't get to him, and I'm more excited about this is a weekend that I thought was fantastically executed, but more and more I'm just I don't understand. I feel almost like I'm being blinded by the potential, but the potential is, it's marvelous. And that fight against Marc, before we get into the controversy of it, and just generally the fighting from Pedro this weekend, him finally having a bike that's not so good on the straights, but is, has been giving him what he needs in the twisty stuff, having parts of the track that were so clearly delineated between where the Ducati was pretty good and where the KTM was pretty good. Sector 1, Sector 2 was where Marc was doing the damage, and then Sector 3, Sector 4, Pedro would reel him in, and then out of the final corner, when Pedro would try to attack, Marc would just burst past him on the outside or on the inside or whatever. And it was a delight to watch. It was like a dance. It was like one of those old school World Superbike races in Qatar with a bike that's good on the straights and bike that's good on the corners, just going at it lap after lap. It was wonderful. It was so pretty to watch, and it was so tidy until the penultimate lap, which we will get to. And let's get to it now, because it wouldn't be a great race without stewarding conversations, which is, I mean, I think we used to take it as a sign of the malaise of the stewarding regime.
Yeah.
But I just take it generally as that's motorsport. You watch motorsport and you're going to have people by default are not happy with stewarding as a concept, I think, just generally lean. People would be happier watching this sport if there was no stewarding, but I don't think it would make for a better sport. But I think fundamentally...
there is an argument that NASCAR...
Yeah, people are happier. Yeah, and then then it gets hashed out with a tackle on the infield grass or whatever at the end of the race.
You punch them afterwards.
Yeah,
but to be fair, in the NASCAR, they lean into it and then do a highlights reel of the season's best fistfights in pit lane.
I don't think we should. I don't think we should do that. Anyway, yes, of course, the positions were reversed after Marc Marquez lunged Pedro Acosta at the final corner in the penultimate lap of the sprint. So Acosta's first win ended up being sort of given to him at the final corner of the final lap. MF says, yep.
Before we go on, Marquez said it was given to him at the final corner in the last lap because that's whenever he got the penalty. I've seen data. He got it like 4 corners before he just didn't look at his dash. So,
I mean,
yeah.
Before we get into the penalty itself, I don't have a problem with the time it took to I really don't.
I think
have
it was really
fast. It was really fast.
We said afterwards, if it had been the Freddie Spencer area, we would have been swapping medals an hour after the podium ceremony somewhere in the paddock. And
I also when there's that few corners remaining and you've ordered a position swap, I think the only way that Marc gets to counterattack if he's cheeky with giving up the position. If he gives up a position in a way that immediately sets him up to attack again, I'm kind of happy he didn't get that chance because I don't like it when that happens. I think that defeats the...
But even if that had happened, by giving him the penalty with 4 corners to go, it beats a black and white, you have been given a 1 second penalty post-race. So at least you can do something in your control.
MF asks, if a rider like Morbidelli or Alex Marquez made Marc's last corner move in the sprint, do you think the steward's decision would have been so controversial? I do not. Burned Pointinger asks...
If the stewards had made the same call 3 laps earlier, it wouldn't have been as controversial.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
Even with the riders involved.
That's part of the game. But
any other point in the race.
Bernd Pointinger says, Bernd Pointinger, I'm sorry, it was lowercase on my screen, so I really made a mess of it. All the letters came together. Says, why was the overtake Fabio Call's super clean block pass penalized, and why does MotoGP go into the F1 no hard racing theme? In the past, we have seen some of the greatest ever battles have these kinds of block pass moves. And Annie, with a good and fair question that I wish I had currently a better answer to, but she says, Marc talks a lot about how you have to adapt to the rules, but I've seen a lot of discussion that there was only contact because Pedro leaned in from the outside, basically try to keep his line instead of cutting out and then trying to do the usual cutback move. And specifically, Jack Miller spoke about that after the race, that he's really unhappy when people try to tough it out on the outside of corners that he feels are lost. And in that situation, he clearly felt, and so did Marc, that the corner had been lost for Pedro. And there's been a suggestion that Pedro's own dive bombs into the final corner were, where Marc gave up on them. I haven't watched them back. I don't think they ever came from that far back. That's my hunch, having watched the race. And I think it'll be quite informative if I'm wrong. But my hunch was that this was a particularly different level of coming from far back. And we talk about, obviously a very important part of the discussion post-race is that Marc stayed within the confines of the track. That is true, and that is relevant to an illegal overtaking move. But I'm really wary of making this a black and white delineation of, if you've stayed within the confines of the track, the move is legal. I don't like that. I know that's how a lot of people would like racing officiated, and a lot of MotoGP riders would prefer racing officiated that way. I don't think that's fair. I think when you're making a move into a corner from that far back rather than going side by side into the braking area, at least having your front wheel alongside the back wheel of the bike, or at least creating a situation where the rider you're attacking has not just a lot of reason to expect, but like it must expect an attack. Whereas Pedro there, I mean, he had to expect an attack, but by right, he kind of was fast enough to at least initially attempt to enter the corner the right way, and then everything happened very quickly and he got squeezed out of room. For me, the way Marc's line went through the corner, while a legal taking of the corner independently of the incident, for me is kind of not a legal taking of the corner in the overtaking sense when you have to account for the bike on your outside. That's me. That's how I viewed it. So for me, it wasn't particularly controversial, but it's also, I understand why it just annoys people generally. It's like the kind of thing that you can't really satisfactorily make a black and white rule for. It's the kind of thing that relies on everybody's perception of what clean racing is, what racing they want to see. Like for me, that wasn't a valid race-winning overtake. I did not want that to win the race. But some people don't mind, and that's a fair way to see it also.
There's an argument to be made that Jack Miller in particular and Marc Marquez to a lesser extent have missed the point a little bit, and Pedro Acosta hasn't, because what Pedro Acosta did by not cutting the corner, by not kind of giving Marc room and then cutting back on him, kind of is adapting to the new stewarding. Yes, it's risky because it might end up in a crash, but he kind of knows that under Simon Crafar consistently over the last year, if he holds his line and stays in front and tips in, he's right. And in that circumstance, then he did the right thing. Even if the 3 years ago that wasn't the right thing because you hook it back, and that is kind of adapting to the rule set. That is reading the situation cleverer. And I get why old school Jack Miller isn't saying it that way, but there is an argument that that's the way to do it.
This is kind of the thing that Bernd was asking about, in that that is F1ification. I have to admit, that is absolutely that is the discussion they would have in F1 right now as to whether sort of you get too much of the driver/rider playing the rules of engagement into the corner rather than racing as comes naturally. It's a fair discussion to have. As the host of this podcast, I'm going to say it's a fair discussion to have, but I'm tired of it and I don't want to have it. So let's talk about Yamaha instead. How does that sound?
Let's do that.
Yeah.
I'm on board.
Yamaha was not good, which is, for me, it's fine. But for me, the most interesting moment of Yamaha's weekend, apart from the fact, and again, I'm getting myself sidetracked, but I'm the host, I can do it. Shout out to both Diogo, Moreira, and Toprak, Razgatlioglu. I thought very, very, very good debut weekends. Right there, right immediately on the right pace, immediately in the right. I suddenly have, there's always that moment coming into somebody joining MotoGP where you're like, are they definitely good enough for this? Are they definitely up for this? And we already have the info with Moreira and Toprak, and that's fantastic. Great work on both of them, from both of them. But yeah, Yamaha looked slow. But what was most noteworthy to me is the Yamaha looked slow, and after a full weekend of sending out all 4 of its factory contracted riders in front of the media on Sunday, no factory contracted riders showed up, and instead the only the only person to show up on behalf of Yamaha was Paolo Pavisio, the project manager, the motorsport boss.
I think he's the MD of Yamaha Racing,
managing director. Yeah. I'm bad with these. I'm bad. Medical doctor. But yeah, what did you make of that, Simon? Because I made something of that. So what did you make of that?
It was stupid, first of all. I obviously, as someone that has traveled here to speak to riders, I'm peeved professionally about it, as will come as no surprise. I'm pissed off that they denied us the chance to speak to Toprak on his debut MotoGP race day. I think that's really bad form. I think that's, regardless of the circumstance, no one was going to ask Toprak about the performance of this year's bike compared to last year's.
Yeah,
it was a day for him to be quite, to celebrate, and I'm
that's a very good point.
That I think that was bad play, that was bad chat, and it kind of, whenever Pavisio did speak to us, he talked a lot about how it was a new project and expectations and everything. Well, dude, you made it a story by not letting the riders tell us that. Why? Why we know that, but you've made us talk about it by looking like you're embarrassed by what's going on when that shouldn't be the
100%.
messaging today.
That's a perfect way to put it.
It shows weakness in their own confidence in the project.
Yeah, I think it shows. Yes, I think it shows. For me, I would suspect, and I don't know as to how the decision was taken or why, but I would suspect that it shows a lack of confidence that certain riders under contract aren't going to say something that you're going to really regret coming out to the media, even though, again, earlier in the weekend, Fabio Quartararo was not, he's the guy I'm talking about, obviously, 100%. He did not sound particularly like animated or alarmed about it. He knows the game. He's accepted it at this point. He's already signed with somebody else. He gets it. It's like he's fine. It's maybe there was some emotion that they were trying to cut off in terms of post-race, maybe because I think you only take that decision if you need to. And they really didn't need to. It's Yamaha has.
This isn't the last time that someone from Yamaha spoke to the media. You remember the famous "We're sorry" press conference? It's not that,
which they also did not need to do.
No,
that was also.
This also unnecessary. You're right.
And it was a huge story, and it immediately the "We're sorry" press conference.
We're still talking about it.
Yeah. In case you don't know, I don't remember the year, but it's fair. It's fair not to know if any of the listeners don't know, because again, I don't remember the year or the specifics because of that whole Valentino Rossi, Maverick Vinales. Yeah. It's one of those seasons with Rossi and Vinales where the bike wasn't quite as good as it was supposed to be, and the two riders were being weird on it. But they didn't have to send out the project leader to apologize then, and they did not have to send out Pavizio to apologize now. I mean, yes, you are getting like a public beating from like ordinary viewers who will tune in and they won't have looked at all the off-season. They won't even really know that you're on the V4 or whatever, what that entails, what the switch was, how big a project it is to get a bike competing from scratch in the final year of regulation against other machines that are frankly monstrous right now. Like, these are incredible, not just the Ducati, not just the Aprilia. Like, clearly the KTM and the Honda are bona fide works of art at this point. Like, it is so important to realize that. Like, these manufacturers have made these super fast, super compliant, super good bikes. It would have taken a miracle for Yamaha to be immediately there with an all-new bike from scratch, and the miracle did not happen. They usually do not. That's kind of the point of the word. And, okay, yeah, they finished half a minute off in the main race. They finished, was it 10, 12, 15 in the sprint? They were actually kind of good in the sprint. They were good.
Yeah, they were all right.
Yeah, they were all right.
They were all right. Above expectations.
You have to treat it as what it is. Normal. It's normal.
Yeah.
It's a new bike. It's normal. You pay the I don't know why they took the decision. There's nothing really to apologize for. Yes, maybe the bike didn't progress as much as it could have from its first wildcard appearance last year. It's a new project. It's normal. It is what it is. They have to be upfront and honest about it, and it's embarrassing maybe to say that we're taking the
thing that's going to happen for Yamaha this year is announcing that Fabio Quartararo is leaving.
100%.
Just takes all of it, gets rid of all of this nonsense of him turning up and being a moany little git in press conferences, because
he was fine this weekend. He was okay.
He was all right this weekend. He was moany little git in testing, but it kind of, you know what I mean. Once you can easily dismiss all of his complaints, well, you're not going to be riding it next year anyway. Why do you care? Yeah. The whole thing becomes easier for Yamaha.
You know, the thing about being a MotoGP rider is that you want the guys, you either want the guys competing for something important, right? Like competing for something that really matters to them. Or at the very least, you want them enjoying it or feeling they're doing something meaningful for their future career. I've said this in the preseason already, and I still feel it. The Quartararo Yamaha thing this year is a waste of everybody's time. And if you guys want to go your separate ways, that's fine. That would be better for everyone, maybe potentially, except for certain bank accounts and certain, etc. But I don't know. Isan Guevara was really good in the Moto2 race. Put him on the MotoGP bike. He's going to be so happy.
Val has been advocating for Isan Guevara all day.
Well, that's okay. I said it once in Slack. This is not true. I said it once in Slack. This is how I get the reputations that I get. This is like, oh, he's the Maverick Vinales for me, an Aldeguer fanboy. It's been a hard weekend to be a Maverick Vinales supporter. Let's put it that way. But yeah, I'm quite happy we're aligned on this, because I don't even really see what other way to do it. Just don't make a big deal out of it. yeah, you're not ready. You're not competitive. You're not going to score very much in these early rounds. You're not going to be competitive until the new engine comes, whenever it comes. It's fine. I know you're going to get pilloried by, casual viewers, and that's part of the game too. But I guess having to handle us with kid gloves doesn't really fix that issue, does it?
They don't have to handle us with kid gloves.
Yeah, exactly.
But they did anyway. Yeah. And then that's
we have a bit of a gap to Brazil. So we're still, we're a lot of other questions. There are a lot of other very interesting riders to talk about this weekend. Joan Mir was fantastic and, got screwed. Pecco Bagnaia had a weekend, a whole weekend. Yeah, a very interesting weekend.
Yeah.
And interesting, of course, is code for bad. But yeah, we're going to talk about this in the gap. Before we go, there's one thing I want to say, because I think it is the most relevant right now. It's a good track. I like this track a lot. Yeah. And not in the sense that it does produce. I mean, we got good races across the board, especially like the Moto3 race was fantastic. But
and also like this place is booming. You've been here. You know what it's like in terms of atmosphere, and it gets bigger and better every year. I was leaving last night. It feels so. It's quite a long way from the car park to the main road. There's quite a long track to get out of here, and it feels like every year you go further and further out that road before you get to the end of festivities. And like last night, I was literally out at the main road, out of the circuit, which is probably like a 3-kilometer drive from where I park. And there was still a Muay Thai fight going on in an arena at the side of the road, because things have expanded out that far from the track now. It's just like this should be the role model for Southeast Asian MotoGP races. This should be, for this part of the world, this is what everyone should be made to come here. The way that Le Mans is in Europe, you should be made to come here and then try and replicate this in your own country, because that's how you grow the sport. It's not gimmicks about street races. It's just creating a good atmosphere, good fun, good entertainment. Cool. And the track works with that too, because the track just gives good racing.
In terms of as you touched upon the surroundings, and me having been there, I'm the least touristy person in the world. For me, like a visit like this isn't really like pleasant at all. And I still have very fond memories of doing the trek to Buriram, which was a track exactly like hours after I'd returned to my home from the Russian Grand Prix in Formula One, and then immediately go to Thailand, to Bangkok, and then hop a train to Buriram, which is quite far away. It's quite, quite distant from where I arrived. And still I have very, like, there was just something unique and like really, really special about it. And I remember a few years ago, it was popping up that we're not totally sure if this race is going to hang around for the long haul. There were some doubts.
There's political issues.
Yeah.
More than it's not because of the circuit was in it. Yeah, it's political.
Yeah, and that was quite a sad thing to hear, and I'm glad it's sticking around right now, and it's here. But also, the track, it's nobody's idea of the most like exciting track to look at. It's probably nobody's idea of the most exciting layout, although clearly it works. Clearly it works for bike racing. It gives good racing, but also it's what is a very important part of it to me. Notice how few crashes we had in MotoGP this weekend, specifically like track induced crashes. Like people didn't fall much, and though they're clearly being taxed by the track is interesting. It's like it's separating riders. It's it takes the riders say it's easy, but it's clearly not like easy. I mean, the gaps are small, so it is easy, but it's not crazy easy. And the racing is good, and the physical demands are maybe sometimes a little bit much, but they're an interesting twist on things in terms of the heat. But when riders crash, they crash quite slowly. If it's like a normal singular crash, they usually just have a slow tip off, and then they're fine. And it's really important for modern MotoGP right now, because we get riders who are hurt all the time. Our riders are hurt all the time, and we're scared for them all the time. And it was nice to watch a weekend and not see the crash graphic come up all the time. I just see, the guys are pushing, they're doing great laps, and they're staying on the bike. That's I know that's not how everybody feels about racing, but I want to be clear. That's how I feel about racing. The fewer they crash, the happier I am. 100%.
Can't agree more. Nothing else to say. 10 out of 10.
Wow. Such harmony when Matt isn't here, is it? Really, I mean, he's a real disruptor. He sows the seeds of discord between the two of us, but actually, apparently, our opinions of racing are 100% the same. And that'll be that from our Thailand Grand Prix episode. Great. It's great to be back in the groove. Great to have had actual racing, actual meaningful results. People trying. No more testing. Testing is awful. Racing rules. Remember that. That's the official slogan of me. It's not the opinion held by the podcast, just me. But I'm the host today, so I can say it. See you next time, whenever that next time is, but probably pretty soon.